Hey guys, welcome to a Goldfish's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm Goldfish Gallant and this is my Tempo Sindell deck overview for February 2021. First things first, we're going to start with the core package of the deck, the cards that I believe almost every version of the deck should be playing. One Gehenna. Gehenna is an amazing tempo play. It will always get value in some form, especially in important matchups. Like in the Ozo matchup, you very much want to save Gehenna for the Stallius and have it be a really big swing turn for you. Gehenna just allows really big resets of play. Cerberam, one of the best cards in the game. Fantastic, you have to run it. It swings really hard for 6 points when you need burst. Pulls more Sindells from deck so you can proc Bone Ladder faster. It clears boards with 2 attacks. It's just great. Ghatomic Ghi, just a big card for Bone Ladder to hit. You should pretty much be running this all the time. You can maybe cut it if you're running a slower version. Maybe you side it out, but I don't know. 2 Meltalons, great card, very close to staple status, but few decks that maybe don't like to run Meltalon. Demoknight, this one's also debatable, but I think sometimes it's hard to get all of the pieces for your Bone Ladders, and two Demoknights just allow that to happen a lot easier. You put pressure on the board for 3 points for 4 stars. He's Sindell, so he procs the planet, getting you stars. So it's never bad to really play him. Skelepede, basically just another Demoknight, except better because we hit it with Skeleghast. So Skeleghast and Skelepede are like Cerberam in that they board clear most of the time. They put a lot of damage on the board quickly, but they're very cheap and they're more Bone Ladder targets, and they create bodies as well. Another thing is that Skeleghast, in really difficult matchups, you can just get to 16 points and you can start chipping away with Skeleghast by playing Skeleghast, spawning the Pede, crashing the Ghast in, gaining a point, and then you do this multiple times. You Bone Ladder a couple times, you can get 6 points just off of that. Wakooman, decent draw power, another target for Bone Ladder. Technically only 2 stars because of Sindell's ability. He's just cheap, he's a body, plays to the effects that we want. Sometimes Wakooman can be a bit slow and doesn't have the power that you want to really keep pushing and keep up pressure. Wakooman is sometimes a debatable cut if you're trying to go really aggressive. It's also sideable, which is fine, but I think most of the time you're running Wakooman if you're not getting too crazy. Fraxle, it's sideable type of thing. Fraxle and Wakooman are pretty similar in that you can just play them, sit on them for a turn, and reset, get value. Fraxle is a little more of an aggressive option over something like Shockafly or Orbob that you might want to play, but Fraxle puts on a little extra pressure by being able to attack for 2 points instead of 1, and also gains you stars. Bone Ladder, this is like the bread and butter of the deck. You want to be playing your Bone Ladders to get your Ghasts. Against Zoo, usually you're getting your Ghasts, completely chopping through their boards, or against mid-rangey decks you're grabbing your Ghatomic Ghi and having a really big body that contests their large plays, and they usually can't keep up because they're paying the full star cost for all of their big cards. For Sale Sign, this is a really good card. I started running in a lot of my decks after realizing how good it was. It's just really strong, like especially in the mid-range matchups where they play something big, the stars are about even, you drop for Sale Sign, you yoink their creature, they're left with hardly any stars, and you've got a huge body. So you basically remove all of their initiative by stealing their creature. Kind of crazy. Really good card, and I really like it. So that just about sums up the basic core, and now we'll get into the auto includes. So these are the staple cards that you're going to be running in every single deck that the auto includes. Every deck runs 2 Pelfam, every deck should be running 2 Spoons, every deck should be running 2 Slush Infestation, 1 Galaxy Crash, 1 Phantom Matter, 1 Beast of the Black Hole. It's basically undebatable that you automatically put these cards in your deck, unless you're playing an Enderman's Telescope Zoo deck. Pretty standard, just a quick run through of these for any beginner players or something coming into the game off this video, looking for a deck to play. These cards should be in every single one of your decks, every single one that you make. Alright, so now we move on to the different ways, the different variants of the deck. So I believe there are two main ways to play the deck. You can either run the Knight package, which sort of gives you a smaller curve out of creatures, smaller stars, easy to play, a bit more passive, really says to your opponent that you're just gonna sit there and get value off your small creatures, play the classic tempo game of start trading up for stars and swinging when you can, which is why we have the 1 KO, because we have these smaller creatures and we can get extra value off getting a big KO on something important. And you just say, okay, I'll just sit until my Gehenna and win the game slowly and just keep chipping you out, basically. Hey guys, Futurefish here. Just wanted to clarify something. In the video, I feel like I undersold the Knight package a little bit, saying it's slow, when this isn't exactly true, since the Knight package is actually faster than the mid-range version, in the sense that it's active and online right from turn 1. The bigger version of the deck takes quite a few turns to actually get rolling and get some momentum. But another great quality about it is that you basically get free wins against anything zoo or creature-based aggro decks, because Infi allows you to have complete board control and presence all the time. Completely free. The other way that I actually prefer, that I started playing more recently, is a more mid-rangey version of the deck, where we run 2 Time Flash Portals for a bit more aggressive play, a bit more burst damage. We run a second Ghatomic Ghi to hopefully get to it faster so we can Bone Ladder it easier, and also adds more mid-range play because we can also just play the Ghatomic Ghi naturally. And a Planetary Field to prevent battles, so we can keep our strong boards and keep pressure up on the opponent. When we're running the Knight version of the deck, we run our 2 Infis to either hit our Pyro Knight or our 2 Demoknights that are in our main core package. For nice value in the early game, you just play Infi, you chip away, and when they swing into your Infi, they have a Knight to either overextend and play through, or they're losing their creature for free next turn, and you can just sit there and not have to play a new creature, and you get a lot of value off that. You basically get an extra 2 copies of Fraxle by playing Infi the Galactic Squire, and KO lets us be more greedy with just sitting back and doing less, killing a big threat like an Ozo or a Stalius or something. With the Planetary Field, Ghatomic Ghi, Time Flash Portal sort of setup, we use Planetary Field to really keep pressure up on the opponent. Last thing I want to talk about here is the Beast of the Black Hole play around. The definitely easy option that a lot of people go for is Activation, Activated, Activator, AAA. It's nice and easy. You just drop this, stop the Beast of the Black Hole, and you keep your pressure up, which you would think is pretty good. And I don't think it's bad. It certainly can just win games on the spot by basically having the opponent already have the Beast of the Black Hole in the grave. Black Hole Blocker is actually another interesting option that you could potentially go with, because not only does this prevent you from losing your board to Beast of the Black Hole, but you can also stop Galaxy Crashes with this. It's a really interesting idea that I explored for a little bit. I had some success with it, but I don't prefer it over other options. I think it's certainly playable, especially if you're going for a really aggressive build of the deck and you're just trying to go crazy and swing with 2 cards at a time. But you do have to remember that this won't prevent Beast of the Black Hole or Galaxy Crash if it's only killing 1 card. So I wouldn't recommend this as much in the more mid-rangey version, because oftentimes you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on with just the singular card. So I think in the Knight version, Black Hole Blocker makes more sense than in the mid-range version, because you'll have Infis and Fraxles, which you don't want to die to card effects, you want them to die by battle. The option that I am most fond of is actually just running the singular copy of Guster, play Slush Infestation in one zone, Gust the other zone, and swing for big burst damage, because oftentimes I think that it's possible to just simply play through Beast of the Black Hole if you don't draw into Guster, and if you do, then it's just a bonus. And Guster has a lot more versatility. It can remove problematic overextends in buying multiple creature zones, multiple battle zones at once. It can really shut down some gimmicky decks, which I really like. If you're playing this deck well enough, Beast of the Black Hole shouldn't be a problem because you can just slow roll them and attack with one creature at a time and keep that pressure up. In the Ozo matchup, potentially where it's a struggle to reach 20 points, AAA can help out, especially when you're trying to go for that last push, but they've held Beast of the Black Hole the entire time. But I think the key to that matchup is applying pressure early. So if they haven't already used Beast of the Black Hole and you haven't ended out the game, it's just a case of not having ended the game quick enough. Because if they use the Beast of the Black Hole early, that's really good for you, and you shouldn't be disheartened if your board gets cleared early, because that just means you're free to attack for the rest of the game with absolutely no fear, which allows for some pretty disgusting overextensions. Hey guys, Future Fish back again. So while recording the video, I accidentally paused over my talking about Orbov and Shockafly, so we'll just touch on those quickly. Orbov and Shockafly are perfectly fine to put in the main deck if you want to go for a more slow and controlling playstyle, but you definitely want to put them in the sideboard for any crazy aggressive decks, combo decks, and just anything you're scared of. You can put these cards in and you shouldn't really have any more problems. But they are perfectly runnable in the main deck, as they give you free turns to recuperate stars and reset and regain your tempo back up on the opponent. So yeah, if these guys aren't in the main deck, definitely consider them for the sideboard. The second copy of Guster, because it's Guster, and having the option for the second Guster is really big. Sometimes you just need another copy of Guster. The Turn Utopian is a really interesting card consideration, actually, and I think it makes a lot of sense in the sideboard, where you want where you side it into the matchups where you want to play really slow and sort of drain the opponent of stars. In matchups where you can't really find a time to play your Pelfams, and so this is a really good proactive way to play your Pelfams. You drop your Turned Utopian on, make them lose 3 stars, play Pelfam, return the Turned Utopian on back to your hand, effectively making your Pelfam cost 4 now. Then you can drop the Turned Utopian on back onto their board, and they've lost 6 stars, and Pelfam can clear the Turned Utopian on. And now you have a 7-star body on the board, and you've drained your opponent for 6 stars. I think it's a really strong way to play in really specific matchups. I haven't really thought about the nuances of what matchups you would like to do this in, but it's definitely a consideration. Abandonment, I personally wouldn't really put this in my sideboard, but I can definitely see the appeal, and I think it's not really a bad card at all. It's perfectly sideable. Maybe something like a zoo deck that runs a 50-50 split of Shios and Sindell creatures. Abandonment maybe is good in that matchup, but I think Tempo Sindell already has a really good matchup into the zoo variants, so I don't think that's really a problem. So oftentimes Abandonment won't really be necessary. For future meta shifts and changes, Abandonment is something to keep in mind. And the second Planetary Field could also be a consideration for your sideboard if there's a lot of board clearing happening through battle that you just want to prevent, and you want the second Planetary Field to really lock down on the opponent's answers to any of your creatures. Alright, so to finish things off for the deck building section, we're going to go over some possible includes for the deck. These are cards that I either just haven't tested yet, they're too meta dependent, or I just think they're straight up bad. Starting off with Boominator, which is a 5-star, which already makes it awkward to play. It also requires you to have both zones already established before you can really make any big plays with it. So I think that's a big problem for the card. And I used to run this in very early versions of the deck, very early builds, and it did not perform very well, but it could use a little more testing. However, I do not think this is a good card to be running in your Tempo Sindell deck. Moving on to resource removal, we have 2 options. We have Underwood Burrow, we have Meteoroid Storm. I prefer Meteoroid Storm over Underwood Burrower, and I'm going to tell you why. Underwood Burrow is a 6-star creature with stats that will die to most 4 stars, so really you're not getting much value out of having it as a body. I just think it's too understated to warrant running it as your main way of removing resources if the meta so inclines you to put in resource removal into your deck. I would personally run Meteoroid Storm because it's free, you can play it anytime, you don't have to wait for 6 stars and an empty zone to play this into. You just drop your Meteoroid Storm, and sometimes you hit a Slush Infestation as well as the trouble resource card that you're trying to hit, and it's pretty good. Underwood Burrow can only hit 1 and it dies to most 4 stars. So for those reasons, I would run Meteoroid Storm over Underwood Burrower almost every single time. FaceTime and Plube. These two cards are basically equivalent to Fraxle. It's completely preference, I think. I haven't done much testing with FaceTime. Haven't really done much testing with Plube and Tempo specifically. So I think they're viable options that you can test out and see which one works best with your playstyle. I'm just running Fraxle for the moment because it's a pretty big catch-up card sometimes, especially into mid-range, which is one of the more testing decks for Tempo Sindell to go up against. Last but not least, we're going to talk about some consistency card options. So we have Helpo Belt, which hits the KO that you may or may not be running, your For Sale Sign, Phantom Matter, all really good cards in the deck. It does cost 3 stars, so it can remove a little bit of power from some of your plays, especially with it having anti-synergy with For Sale Sign and that you lose some stars. But if you find you're often wanting to get to your attachments faster, Helpo Belt's a fine option. Telepathic Touch for the same reasons, except for your Gehenna. Sometimes you just want to sit and look for your Gehenna. Telepathic Touch is fine. It thins the deck by 1. Gehenna, obviously a very potent card and very valuable. And if your playstyle revolves more around playing your Gehenna with this deck, then by all means run Telepathic Touch. Cosmic Treasure and Star Dealer, I think these two cards are probably bad because generally with this deck you're playing it wrong if you're falling behind like this. But Cosmic Treasure, if you build the deck in a really aggressive way that's leaning more towards Zoo, then Cosmic Treasure is probably a fine option. But at that point it's hard to really call it tempo. Star Dealer is the same reasons, except on the opposite end of the spectrum. Sometimes you go really mid-range heavy and it's airing not really being tempo anymore. But if you're going really big with creature costs, then Star Dealer probably helps out there. Obviously, I haven't explored that route yet. And finally, probably my favorite card out of these possible includes that I haven't gotten to play around with yet. Mystical Relic Rainbow Quill. Really meta-dependent card on if there's important cards you need to snipe out of the opponent's hand. But with the increase in popularity of Gaios combo and the Verities combo as well, Rainbow Quill might be an include potentially for some lists. I really like this card because even if it's not played into a matchup where you need to snipe an important card out of the hand, you're still drawing 2 new cards and ditching something maybe bricky from your hand. It can really fix hands. The only worry would be is that you're improving the hand of your opponent, but ideally the cards in your deck are better than the cards in your opponent's deck if you are the superior deck builder. So in a perfect world, drawing 2 new cards is better for you than it is for the opponent. Next, we'll hop into my personal list and I'll discuss how to tackle some important matchups. Alright guys, so this is my personal build of the deck, and we're just gonna talk about matchups for a little bit here. So for this build I went with the extra Ghatomic Ghi, 2 Flash Portals and a Planetary Field, mostly because I think the Infi the Galactic Squire build is just not testing enough for matchups against Sindell Control and Ozo. Ozo especially just removes your Infis, removes your Fraxles, doesn't care about KO, and just rolls all over you essentially. You can't really afford to play slow in that matchup. You can sometimes outvalue, but it's a strategy that I wouldn't necessarily recommend. You really have to play perfectly to pull something like that off. I would much prefer to just run bigger cards, get immense value off my bone ladders, and hopefully catch the Ozo player on a bad cycle of stars. And also versus Sindell Control, the king of playing slow, you're not trying to play slow against that deck, so Infi just doesn't make a lot of sense. I decided to not go for any crazy Cosmic Treasure shenanigans because I prefer to just play nice and consistent with this nice tight build, and I especially like For Sale Sign as a punish card. One of the more testing decks for Tempo Sindell to play against is Barrow Midrange because they can afford to wait and they can sometimes keep up with your bone ladders, especially if they come online before your bone ladder is active. It's going to be really hard to stay afloat oftentimes, but if you can stabilize in that matchup, then you should have a really even skill matchup at that point. Ozo matchup is pretty similar, except you want to be going as aggressive as possible, at least I think, because until the Ozo player hits their 3 planets and an Ozo in hand and the 7 stars to play it, they're not doing too much, and they're especially not threatening you very much. At the same time as being aggressive, you need to be playing as proactively as possible, trying to apply pressure and just force out resources that would otherwise get them to the Rozo faster. Zoo variants, I think this deck has a really easy time against Zoo, mostly just because of Skeleghast carries in those matchups, and you have Bone Ladders to grab those Skeleghast back. Guster is really good against Zoo as well, because once they set up the double zones and you Guster them, it's really quite crushing. They don't really have much star gain unless they're playing a Sindell variant, in which case they're still not as star efficient as you are, so you should be fine. Planetary Field also crushes that matchup, where you Skeleghast into your Skelepede, clear their board, they drop their Pyronite plus Mag Sprout for 4, swing into you, you Planetary Field, and now you've spent no stars to clear 2 of their boards. It's kind of brutal for Zoo. So Night Jungle Control, that matchup, basically no experience with the matchup, not really enough players to really gauge how the matchup should play completely, but I do think you can afford to be pretty aggressive in the matchup. They're not really going to be doing much to you, since a lot of cards that you play, if you just play with your small packages first, they're not going to want to glut any of that. They're going to want to save their gluts for your Ghatomic Ghi, Pelfams, and Cerberam. So if you just hold those, it's difficult for them to really find what to do against your smaller stuff. They can Charge Blaster, and they can sort of untangle, and it's probably about even by the mid game, depending on how stable they are. But if you sort of throw them off balance early, you can really just sort of wait them out and burst them down with Pelfam, Guster, or Cerberam, Guster, things like that, especially with Time Flash and the chip damage provided by Skeleghast. There's just a lot of versatility in this deck that allows you to play in whatever way you need to win a matchup. You know, if you need to play slowly, you can play it slow and just chip down and eventually close the game off with Skeleghast. Or if you need to play really aggressive, you can do that, and you can push with your smaller package and run the Bone Ladders. Or if you need to play big, you have the options with Ghatomic Ghi and Pelfam and Meltalon, and even Phantasmal for Sail Sign. Everything, I think, just comes together really nicely in this particular build. Of course, you can build it to be fully focused on being completely aggressive, fully focused on being completely defensive. But for me, this style of play I really like, and if you're looking to just pick up Tempo Sindell and just jump in, play some games, this deck copy will be in the description. You can just pick it up and play with it. So that just about does it for the video. I hope you guys got some value out of the overview of the deck and understand the deck a bit better, and hopefully it helps you to play it or either play against it even in the future. Thank you guys for watching.